It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
It's the Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. It is a film review day, Logan. So we're going to dive deeper into what happened in the 38-31 loss against the Philadelphia Eagles. Disclaimer for the start of this podcast. We're recording this Tuesday morning. As of right now, there are no trades to talk about for the Commanders. If one happens, we will talk about it on the radio show this afternoon. The deadline is after, so whether we give you a bonus episode from my show with just me or me and a guest, or Logan pops on the show, or however we want to do that, we can handle a trade later. But if there's a gigantic Montez Sweat deal that happens or whatever else that could happen, it's not going to be talked about on this podcast because we don't know what it is yet.
It's only we film it early. It's like we're earlier than normal filming it because you have stuff to do today. So
that is true. And also the purpose of this podcast is the film review. So we're going to stay focused on that. Okay. With that disclaimer out of the way, Logan, we were having probably one of our more heated discussions we've ever had before the show. We're two reasonable people disagreeing about kind of the story of this game. You are coming at this from your perspective, which is someone who played offense for 10 years in the NFL. And I think it's a perfectly understandable and, in fact, like correct stance on kind of what went wrong in this game, because multiple things can be true. It's just kind of how we weight these things, where I look at this from I think a more global view and look at a defense that is really, I mean, I don't need to parse words. Like, they're playing the opposite of the level that we were hoping.
Sure.
We hope they'd be a top 5 unit. They are second worst in the league in points allowed and yards allowed. But when you look at like the story of this game, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Like, where do you see where the game is won and lost?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's on the offensive side of the football, and I get what everyone's going to say. Like, the defense didn't play well, and I'm with that. I'm 100% on board. Like, they need to play better. I thought they made plays in a broad sense of the term. You know, you get the fumble down in the low red with Cam Kroll, and people say, "Oh, that's a little bit lucky." But I feel like on that one, he kind of made his own luck. Like, he's tackling the ball, he's ripping at it. He does a great job, kind of skating by the receiver, tackle for loss in the backfield, tackles the ball, ball's out. Great job, right? I think the tush push thing, at least from my eye, obviously the execution by Philly is really high, but I think you get Daron Payne diving at an angle kind of behind the pile and punching at the ball. And I don't know if that was the plan or if that's something he did on his own. I think the ball
at the very least, if he ran into the guard, which is what I thought happened, like you have to actually stop the guard. Like there's got to be a stop of that mass to make that happen. Yeah,
and so I really think they just did even though that's not excellent, you know, like you may be a little bit lucky on the tush push. I think they made plays. I think they had a 3-and-out earlier in the first half. Good job, right? And when you're playing the Philadelphia Eagles, and when you watch the Philadelphia Eagles, they are just kind of, there's an inevitability to how they play. And so I guess my expectation is that Philly's going to make plays. And can your defense make enough plays so your offense can win the game? And this is a very kind of analytics 2023 offensive driven perspective. But there's not a good enough defense for a good offense. And I know that sounds crazy, and that's a little bit counterintuitive to what a lot of fans think and like traditionally what football looks at. But if the offense is playing well, the play caller's in his bag, the quarterback's playing well, the receivers are making plays, there's not a whole lot you can do. And when I look at when I reviewed this film, again, I think the defense can play better. I think they should play better. But in this game, it comes down to Jalen Hurts making plays and A.J. Brown making plays, really is what it comes down to. And you're not going to get stops versus an offense like that, in my opinion, when they're playing that well. Obviously, there's the coverage bust, which is maddening, and that's something that they definitely got to get fixed because you got to make them drive the length of the field. But I look at it, it's 24-24. You have the ball as an offense. You drive down, it's 4-8. You don't get it. There's 3 incompletions there that I think probably should be completions. 1 to Jahan, 2 to Terry, obviously, that are drops. Like, we'll talk about those in a second. They punt the ball. Your defense comes out. They get a stop in a tied football game. They punt the ball back. You throw an interception. It's 31-24. You get the ball back again, and then you go 4-and-out. And I think that, to me, is a very frustrating thing. And I know that's maybe unreasonable, but as an offensive player, I'm like, you have the game in your hand. The game is there. And like as an offensive player, I remember being in Kyle's meetings and Sean meetings, and it's like in this situation, like Sean, like on Monday, if we came back after this game and we lost this game, Kyle would be in fits because he knows that it's an offensive driven league and that we should win this game. And I know that's a very offensive centric perspective, but you had the ball twice and you could have gone down and scored. And I understand it's a young football player. I understand the defense should be better, but just the way I prioritize things and the way I look at football now, those situations as an offense, you need to capitalize on them and you score points, or you need at least to possess the football. So I think that's why I feel that way. And again, like I think the offense did a tremendous job. I thought they did a tremendous job. They looked in rhythm. I thought Sam had a lot of responsibility at the line of scrimmage, which I thought was great. I thought he was identifying matchups correctly. I thought he made some big time throws, all those things. But that can be true. And also my frustration with the end of the game and how it played out can also be true. And I think, you said on the post-game pod that Jahan felt like the team kind of clamped up. And I felt that a little bit.
They flinched. That was his word.
Yeah, they flinched. And I felt that a little bit when I was watching. I'm like, here's your opportunity to go seal this game and kind of put your clamp on, put your stamp on it and say, hey, we're going to go up. We're going to go up 31-24. And we're going to put Philly in a situation where they got to stress and grind to get back in this game. And we couldn't do it. And I think, how realistic is that? I don't know. But my expectation as a former player, as a play caller now, is that happens. Like, when I call games and this happened to me last week. This exact same thing happened. And I am upset about it because when I called this game, I didn't execute in those situations. I didn't put the guys in a good position to be successful. So that's how I think about it. And again, defense is historically bad, all those things. But I'm saying if you wanted to win this game, the offense had two opportunities to do it, and they couldn't do it.
I hear you. And I think that, like, even again, if it's not a pick, if it's a 7-play drive and a punt,
right,
like that's so much better. But Sam threw the ball 52 times and he had like 4 bad throws the entire game. That to me is hard to go back. And once you kind of zoom out a little bit, go like, oh yeah, Howell's got to play better. Like Sam was awesome. And we'll get into how great he was later in the show. But, you talk about the defense making plays. They made some, but again, like the difference in, just knocking a ball away versus like making a pick. Like, I don't need more interceptions, more turnovers. What I need you to do is stop having guys moss you every single week, multiple times. Like, you just can't. The coverage bust, like that's an easy one. We talked about it on Take 5. Like, you got to get communicated. You got to be in the right coverage. You got to execute whatever. But like Emmanuel Forbes is in position to make a play. Just knock the ball away. Danny Johnson has his hand in between Julio Jones's arm and the end zone. You knock that away. Can you turn one of those touchdowns into a field goal? Benjamin St. Juste, the first one to A.J. Brown, I don't know what you do with that one. That's one-handed catch. That's sick. Like, what the hell are you going to do with that? But I think that to look at this and say, all right, you're up 17-10 at half. Like, you've done some great things defensively. How do you keep that going? And then, even bigger picture, Logan, I know you're zooming in on this and I'm kind of zooming out, but the Eagles have only put up 30 points twice this year. And it's against this team both times. So I hear you that they got going. They found it. They're in a rhythm. Sirianni and Brian Johnson are clicking. Hurts is playing well. He seems to be really comfortable and seeing the field well. A.J. Brown's in his bag. Devontae is doing just enough. All that stuff. But why is it only happening against this team? Like, what did the Jets do? What did these other teams do to prevent this from happening? And I think especially, and this is super big picture, but with the resources given on that side of the ball compared to the resources deployed on offense, you shouldn't be expecting this offense to have to score 40 to win a game. And that's realistically where they were at. Or 35 to win a game. If you want to say like, okay, well, after the pick, like, what are you supposed to do there defensively? But it's just like this defense is underperforming every other defense against common opponents week in and week out. And eventually you gotta, like, I think we have to assign blame there and say, why is this happening and how can they fix it week in and week out, as opposed to just going, how does the offense overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, I also think there's a lot of familiarity between these two teams, and I don't think it's a coincidence that this offense plays really well against Philadelphia too. I think they know each other really well. I think it's like that common opponent thing. Maybe common opponent in division would be a better metric to look at. I'm not sure what that looks like, but yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with anything you said. Defense has to play better. However, I would just call attention to the fact that like you're 0 for 3 on fourth down. So there's that fourth down conversion you don't get that ends up leading to points for Philadelphia. And I say to myself, like, man, like you get that and the game is almost over if you get that fourth down conversion where they throw the almost interception to Terry with James Bradbury in coverage, very handsy coverage by James Bradbury. But hey, don't get the call there. That's fine. So that's one. And then the end of game situation, like say what you want. Like, you talk about roster construction, resource allocation. They need to be playing better. I don't disagree with that. But I'm talking about the game flow in this specific game. You have the ball. You have 2 opportunities to score and you don't do it. And one of them is like kind of a catastrophe in terms of the ball is intercepted and you're inside the 10. And so that's the way I look at it. And again, like Sam had an excellent game. I thought he played really well. I did a lot of really good things offensively. I think they might have turned a corner here, which is great. But in terms of what's required to win this football game, especially given what the defense had been going against, right, all day and how they'd been playing, I think that's the other thing. The context of the game is like, offensively that it's going to be very challenging for the defense to stop them. And for whatever reason that is that familiarity? Is that whatever it may be? But I just look at it and I say to myself, like, man, like that's tough. And then it's to me, it's almost like there's like a third layer to it in that you have an opportunity to, again, tie the football game, but you go 4 and out inside your own 15 and then they score again. And I think that whole sequence was just a little disappointing for me. And I also think it's like correlated the fact that maybe it is because the defense is struggling. Like you need to support that group offensively better. And is that fair? I don't know. I don't know if I'm not thinking about fair. I'm thinking about what's going to take to win the game. And that's what it's going to take to win the game. So, yeah, like, would you like Benjamin St-Juste to make a play on one of those? And it doesn't even have to be on one of the touchdowns. Like, can he make a play on that 20-yard out on a 3rd and 6 in the middle of the first quarter, right? Yeah, that'd be great. Make that play. And you don't. It's just tough against that offense. The way Jalen Hurts played in that game, and the way he played in that game was very high level. Like I was very impressed with him. Like he never seemed flustered. The offense never seemed flustered in general. Some of those throws that he was making were awesome. But yeah, you'd like to see defense make some plays. The one that sticks out to me was the Forbes down in like near the tunnel end where Quan's it's 2-man and Quan's coming over to help, and you really have 2 guys in the same spot. And I'm like, man, one of you guys couldn't poke the ball out there or laid a hit or whatever it was.
Quan takes a really bad angle there. He just kind of takes himself out of the play.
Yeah.
Forbes just gets, I mean, I said this on 1st and 10 yesterday to start my show. Like, we can say, we can debate whether Forbes is just too small to play in the league, period, right now, or he's got to figure out how to play at his size, but he's for sure too small to play A.J. Brown right now. Yeah. Like, there's just not a lot of contact there, and Brown puts him exactly where he wants him and just goes up over the top.
Yeah, and I also think, I mean, you got to give credit to A.J. Brown, too.
Brown's the best receiver in football right now, the last 7 weeks.
He's playing great. Like, he was a good player in Tennessee, but, yeah, man, that catch in the end zone on St-Juste, like, St-Juste is about in as good a spot as you could possibly be, and for him to one-hand that, get both feet down, like, gosh, like, players make plays, I guess. And I think when I go back, like, when we talked about in the pregame show, like, A.J. Brown's going to get his. The one that's really frustrating to me is the coverage bust, because that's the one you can't let them both get you, and you let them both get you, and I think that's the frustrating thing.
So first of all, clean up Isle Craig stats. There's 2 other games where the Eagles have scored 30 this year. They've scored at 4. Quick misread by me, including last week against the Dolphins. The other one was against the Vikings in week 2, that Thursday night game where the Vikings fumbled 5,742 times. Yeah. So it hasn't been just against the Commanders, but definitely 2 of their best point outputs of the season have been against Washington when it's all said and done. But look, you talk about the comfortability. Like, why is Jalen so comfortable? Where is this D line?
I think that's a good point.
I think that's like one of the things too, is like the third down on that same end, opposite corner, like the tunnel end, but other side of the field, where the first Brown versus Forbes 1-on-1 matchup, like no pressure. None whatsoever on that play. And that just lets A.J. Brown go. Forbes keeps dropping until he's 5 yards off the sticks. Brown, hits the comeback. Easy completion on like a 3rd and 13, I think it was. Like that's just too easy, singled up, and there's no pressure. Like you shouldn't have time to do that. The 4th down that should have been challenged by Rivera, there's no pressure on that. Devontae Smith is able to run around forever. And so, again, it's like the same concept applied to offense that you're applying to the offense of key situations. Let's even take it out of some of the back end stuff. Yep. Where is the defensive line in key situations? And part of this, like one of the things that I noticed when I went back and rewatched the game is Jack actually brought a lot more pressure. And you tipped me off to this during the postgame show. This is something you saw live. Like Jack brought more pressures than I initially realized. Like Mayo blitzed quite a bit. Jamin blitzed quite a bit. They brought some DBs at times. And this Eagles offensive line plus their entire protection package just identified and stonewalled it. Like they're so good. Really as a protection unit, but if you're Chase and Montez and John and Duran, like that's why you're here. You got to be able to bust through that, and in seemingly every key situation, Jalen's able to easily move. I mean, he's great at it, but he's not as great as he usually is because his knees hurt, and clearly you could see it in the game. He didn't want to run, but he's able to get enough space to make plays with his arm or throw the ball away and avoid big negative plays, and that's good quarterbacking, but good quarterbacking can be overcome by a quick win and a sack or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I think like we could probably do like a whole show on this, like the pressure and like because I think about what the Jets did, and the Jets brought a lot of pressure on 3rd down. I think Jack, to his credit, did that, and I think it did pay off in certain situations. You're able to get kind of peel the slide off of John Allen. He's able to squeak through and create a pressure. They did some good stuff in that regard, but the problem is you're leveraging the back end so dramatically. And if you don't win relatively quickly, Hurts is going to buy a little time and make a good throw. And I think there was a couple times where I'm like, you could tell Jack maybe wanted to bring a pressure, but was a little bit nervous because St. Juice gets beat he brings a pressure. It's 3rd and 8. I want to say it was in the first quarter, and St. Juice gets beat on the out to A.J. Brown, and it might have made him take the foot off the gas. But I think when they weren't bringing pressure, to your point, the front 4 was very, very quiet. And this is the best offensive line in football, and I think it shows you what a dominant offensive line can do. Like really, very rarely do I say like a group is dominant, but it's not just this team. It's every team they've played. That group has, I don't want to say stood on their head because they're not doing anything that they can't physically do, but Jordan Mailata is one of the best tackles in football. Obviously, Kelsey at center, Landon Dickerson at guard work really well together. And then whoever they plug in at that right guard just seems to play extremely well. And then Lane Johnson. So it's frustrating. I knew that was going to happen. I knew that they weren't going to be able to generate a ton of pressure with the front 4. Obviously, when they were able to blitz, the pressure went up. Good job. To me, the front 4 against those 5 guys, when it's not in the run, are at a little bit of a disadvantage for whatever reason. And there's a lot that goes into that from a defensive line standpoint. Like when you're rushing a mobile quarterback, makes you a little bit more tentative, all those things. But man, it was tough. It was tough to go back and watch that because like in all of those big explosive pass plays, the line is very, very quiet. And that's kind of the same thing we talked about in the Chicago game. The line would create pressure, but not on the explosive plays. And so what do you do if you're the coach? And if there's one criticism I'd maybe levy against Jack is just like, can the pressure hit a little bit quicker? There were a couple times where they're trying to disguise it, and maybe Philly's going on the quick count, and the rush doesn't quite get started right away. So they're able to kind of sit on the slides, sit on the double teams and pass protection a little bit longer, as opposed to having a bump off right away. And that's something I'd just be like, is that something, if we're self-scouting, that we can get corrected? So I think there's many layers to that. There's good job bringing protection. How do we pressure? How do we maximize those pressures? And then what's the deal with the offensive line in these empty looks, not generating pressure with 4? And I guess you got to give credit to Philly, but I think to your point, you'd like that group to be the group that's been given all this money and all this draft capital. And that being said, like John and Payne had good games. Montez had a pretty solid game. It's just the pressure statistic that we're all kind of hoping for and watching for wasn't there. And I think that's the big thing that's very, very frustrating about this group is in those big moments, like they are very quiet. And, think about one of the things like we were hoping for after the Broncos game, or at least I was hoping for, is that they had found a way to like put their stamp on the game. Here we are,
Right.
here are these 6 plays where the defensive line took over the game. And I can't think of any plays in this game where that was the case. And that's frustrating. And again, when you're playing against the best O-line in football, that's going to happen. But I think you'd like this group with all this talent to step up and say, we can compete with that group, with the offensive line for Philly on a down-to-down basis.
Right. It's, is it going to be less successful than it would against, what you'd hope to have seen against the Giants O-line? And frankly, like this defense did a really good job against the Giants O-line. The Giants did a good job play calling to insulate that.
Yeah.
But you talk about, I think we think of like good O-line play as, oh, they block really well. They don't lose the block. But some of the communication stuff happens quicker versus, Washington with inexperience and not as good of players. When they go to pass off a stunt, it happens slower. And so you see more wins and things like that. Pressures, you cause busts in protection, all that kind of stuff that doesn't happen against Philly.
And
you mentioned
like a little anecdote real quick is like they are so dialed in. There was a protection, a slide protection to the left. I forget what play it was. Jalen had to throw the ball away. It was the only times where the pressure got home. John Ridgway beats Jason Kelce.
It's so much easier to play them if Travis was playing center.
I know, it would be way easier. So beats Jason Kelce, and Jason in the play is looking over his shoulder and yelling at Landon Dickerson. Walls off Ridgway. Jalen Hurts steps up, throws the ball out of the way, and he is pointing in his face. And I was like, that's the standard there. It's like, you were supposed to help me out. Where the hell are you going? Sit your big butt in here and help me out. And I thought like that's what having that like leadership at the center position and a veteran, and like with Lane Johnson there, like, that nobody's messing around there. And I just thought, man, that's a pretty cool thing for a vet to be like in the middle of the play, like block your guy, somehow magically make up for the guy's mistake, and then be like, dude, like pull your head out of your butt, get over here and make this block. So
yeah. That was also a miraculous job by Jason. He was like 0.1 seconds away from getting called for holding on that,
yes.
but he lets him go.
Yeah.
And then
like walls him out. Yeah.
Yeah. John Ridgway is chasing Jalen Hurts, and that's not a fair race. So, it is what it is. You mentioned Montez has a good game. John has a good game. Duran has a good game.
Good game is a relative term here.
They all made some plays. John had like 6 pressures in the game per PFF's count. Like John
I thought this was one of John's better games.
Yeah, for sure. Duran makes a couple of plays here and there. Montez a couple of plays. You'd obviously hope for a little bit more consistency. I was going to ask you about Chase's game anyway, even before you didn't say him there, because to me, this was one of Chase's worst games in a while from what I was able to see.
Yeah.
He's been so dominant as a pass rusher. You don't get that. And I think that the bad stuff that you've seen from him, the lack of effort on a lot of the run plays, or like if the play's not right at him, is he going to go pursue it with a relentless type of play that you want to see from an elite player? It's like I saw that a lot, that it's not there. And it felt like in a lot of situations he's playing patty cake with Jordan Mailata. And I know it can look like you're playing patty cake when you're trying really hard, because Jordan Mailata is like 6'8", 400 pounds, and is just a monster. He's so good at left tackle. So I don't want to necessarily say like, oh, it's 100% because Chase isn't trying.
Yeah.
Because sometimes Jordan Mailata just makes you look that way. But like, to me, that was not a good Chase Young game. I'm curious what you saw.
Yeah, and this is a weird thing, and this is something that like maybe we should like do some research on and watch a little bit of film on. But for whatever reason, there's like a level of pass rusher, right? And so you like Nick Bosa, Micah Parsons, whatever, they'll be dominant against a certain caliber of tackle, like dominant. They'll win, 30% of their rushes. They're very disruptive in the game. And then when they get into like the top 3, 4, 5 guys, so we're talking Lane Johnson, Tristan Wirfs, Trent Williams, that type of guy, they just become like regular pass rushers. And I feel like that with Chase in the first matchup, like he had a pressure on Mailata, and Mailata hadn't given up a pressure the whole year, or he had a sack or pressure, I don't remember, but it was one pressure, one play in 60 snaps, 30 pass rush attempts. And so I do think there was a little bit of like, Mailata's got his number. Lane Johnson has Montez's number. Like when I look at how Lane sets and the type of rusher he's going to play well against, he's going to play well against Montez. They invite these bull rushes. They sit on the inside move. Like that's what Chase wants to do. And you watch how Mailata set Chase today or yesterday or Sunday. He's setting for the inside move. He's waiting very patiently, and Chase just didn't have an answer. And so with these really good tackles who are really well prepared, they know what to take away. It's like, pitchers in baseball, I'm sure to a certain extent, it's like, you want to hit the fastball? I'm not going to give you a fastball. I'm not going to give you an overset. I'm not going to do it. You're going to have to beat me with something else. And that's what they did. And Chase, again, like didn't show up. I think credit to Mailata, but also I don't think it's a coincidence that when Casey and James come in and they're playing with a little better effort, it kind of, you can see it when you're watching film. It like not sparks the defense. That's an exaggeration, but it does stuff to the tackle because they're working, they're in the down. You can tell the tackle's a little bit more stressed. They've got to play the down a little bit longer, as opposed to Chase, who, when Mailata gets him shut off, gets the move shut off, it's a little bit there. Yeah, it's a little bit quiet. It's a little bit, it kind of turns into like a bull rush. And when I look at some of the best passers, I do a lot of defensive line evaluation because I give advice to guys on pass rushing. The best pass rushers stay active late in the down because you don't know, right? Like there was a couple situations, the one to Forbes, or the ball that was completed on Forbes on the comeback that you described earlier, where that's like a 3.5 second drop back. And if you just stay active a little bit longer in your rush, I'm not saying you're going to get a sack, but you might disrupt the throw. And I think that's the thing. Like Allen did a great job in this game. Payne did a great job in this game of just, they didn't win all the time, but there was an activeness, an urgency to their play. Same thing with Montez. And you're kind of like, and I think that's the thing that's frustrating. And now they probably had a lot of yellow rushes, or kind of their base. I call them yellow rushes, kind of like their cautious rushes, these kind of bull rushes right down the middle, which are harder to win on. But at the same time, you can be active on those and be disruptive as well. So I do think there's, it's something you alluded to last week. And I feel like it popped up here in a more dramatic way for Chase. Like when your effort isn't always there, it leads to performances like this, which are kind of, it's not bad, but it's definitely not good. It's just kind of, you're out there. And I think that's frustrating if I'm a teammate or if I'm a fan watching him, for sure.
If you're elite, you can't give up on a play after your first move doesn't work.
100%.
Like, especially at that position, one of the most elite traits you can have is relentlessness.
Yeah.
And, you watch Micah Parsons play, that dude is an animal.
Mm-hmm.
And
Nick Bosa, same thing.
Nick Bosa. I mean, Joey
TJ
Bosa.
Watt, Myles Garrett.
Yeah. Oh, God. Like, I mean, that was JJ Watt. Was he 4-time defensive player of the year? Like, that was JJ.
Yeah.
The elite guys have that, and Chase has not demonstrated it. It might be within him.
An urgency. There's an urgency to their play, because it's really like, you're not going to win clean as a pass rusher all the time. Like, let's say you end up with 12 sacks on the year. 4 of them might be just cleanup sacks. Someone else gets a pressure and you're just working. Right. You just keep working and you get the sack.
That was Montez's sack in the game. Duran missed, but it disrupted the play, and Montez was able to go, okay, I'm going to go tap Jalen on the shoulder as he falls down, and I get credit for the sack.
And Casey's sack was very similar. It's like he flushes, him and Montez go high, they flush him out to the right, and Casey just works. He just works his butt off, chases him down, and gets a sack. And it wasn't anything like technically great about the rush. It was just an effort thing. So
also the difference on that one between probably like a 2-yard loss and a 2-yard gain.
Yeah, because he's working his butt off. And same thing with the Montez one. I'm not, like the guys with good effort. Like, and on that play, Duran does a great job. It's an RPO. He skates the center. He's diving in the backfield to tackle him. He trips Jalen Hurts up, and then Montez is right there. So you see that effort. John had a bunch where it's a blitz, he's bull rushing, he's on a double team, the guy leaves, he sheds violently, and then he's creating pressure. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that those effort rushes showed up against a good offensive line. So and I got to go back and watch Chase individually for a more like in-depth analysis, but my high level thought after watching was like, it just didn't feel very urgent. And some of those other guys were much more urgent. Like even when James is in there and he's bulling on Lane, like, he's not going to win, but you can tell Lane is having to play the whole down. And I think there's value there as a guy, of a fan of football and a fan of pass rush. Like there's value there for sure.
Yeah. One thing I like that they did too is they started a bunch of series with the twos in. Like they rotated a little bit more, and they were like, if these guys aren't going to come off the field when we want them to, or maybe we're trying to get these guys to James and Casey and Fedarian and Ridgeway to wear down these linemen a little bit. Then later in the series, if there's a first down, like we'll bring in the horses and have them go against some more tired guys. So that was one thing I liked from like a coaching strategic standpoint and noticed in the game was starting the series with James and Casey and Fedarian on the field a whole bunch. Anything else from the I mean, we haven't really talked. I don't know what there's to say about the coverage stuff. Like, guys got to make plays.
Yeah, guys got to make plays. And I thought there was a, like I appreciate what Jack was trying to do, right? And I just think like when there's that matchup, like maybe you got to do something different from a man standpoint. And
I guess we should talk about Emmanuel getting matched up on AJ Brown multiple times at big spots, because that seems like a decision that gets made that is preventable, that you should just not do that.
Yeah, and I got to go back and watch those specifically. Like I don't even know what personnel they're in, honestly. I don't know where Fuller's playing. I don't know where St. Juice is playing. But a couple things that stuck out to me. I thought there was some, you mentioned in the pregame that they were going to miss Cody Barton. And I felt like there was a couple of Tampa 2 looks or just straight 2 looks where Mayo's the coverage guy and Mayo's doing everything he can. He's open to the 3 receiver side and he's playing with vision on the quarterback. And those are plays where Barton probably gets a little bit more depth. When the quarterback looks to the backside dig, he's able to push over and maybe get in the throwing lane. I'm not saying he's going to make a play, but just make the look a little bit cloudy. I thought that happened 2 or 3 times with Mayo, specifically on the backside dig. And again, like that's tough. You're open to 3x1. The rule is open to 3x1. I get it.
He does it right. He's just like, all due respect to David Mayo, but like that's why he's a backup in the league.
Yeah, and I think
from a skill set, physical trait standpoint, he doesn't have the speed and quickness and size and length to get there.
Right. And so like that's where you kind of miss a guy like Barton. And I think Jamin and Khalid did some good stuff, but they had some mistakes. But in terms of the secondary, like I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. Like, because in those man-to-man situations, at some point you got to win. And maybe that's an unfair ask versus AJ Brown, the way he's playing right now. Like maybe that is, I don't know. I really,
can you win 5% more of the time? Not every time, but can you win instead of winning 20% of the time, can you win 25% of the time,
Well, it's funny. Like I do think like it maybe even needs to be more than that. Cause like St. Juice does a great job on Devontae Smith. I think it was a cover 2 look. He gets hands on, winds him to the sideline, and Hurts wants to throw the out so bad, but St. Juice has just gloved him up, and he's got to move. He's got to move on to his next target. They got to pressure us to throw the ball away. And I think to myself, like, like there are plays like that for the secondary in throughout the game, but it really comes down to like I'm trying to think. It's the one to Devontae Smith on 4th and 4. It's the touchdown to AJ Brown. It's the big completion on Forbes that ends up being a touchdown in the Tampa 2. And like that's really what it comes down to. Like I think the down-to-down defense is pretty good. Like they're in pretty good spots, but like that's the nature of defense is like you could watch, let's say it's 70 clips, like 55 of them are pretty good. And then there's like 15 where you're like, damn, like those negatively impact the outcome of the game. And I think that's something that I have a really hard time with as an offensive player, like negotiating, because even when I'm watching defense, I'm like, this play happens or this third down happens because the offense doesn't execute well. And like I just think that's the nature of defense now. Like it's really so reliant on the level of offense you're playing, which is one of the reasons I think they'll play better against Seattle. I think they'll play better against New England the next couple of weeks, because those offenses aren't quite as good as Philly. But man, like it's really hard. And you've brought this up, like defenses are playing better now in the NFL. They're kind of dictating more to offenses. But
the best year defenses have had in the NFL in a long time.
And that could be spuriously correlated to this is also a year where there's more young quarterbacks starting than ever before. But for whatever reason, our defense is not playing as well. And I do think it's because they've played some really good quarterbacks. And I just think I think there's a really good correlation or causation there between the caliber of quarterback, the caliber of offense, and the defensive production. But to your point, like you got to make plays. You have to make plays, and I don't know how to do that. I wish there was some layered, nuanced analysis here. But
I
like
tried to ask that question to multiple people on Sunday, and I felt like a moron asking a question. I was like, how do you, and I realized what I was asking. I was like, you just have to do it. Like, there is no, like, the technique. I mean, ask Ron, and he's like, you got to play through the hands. And, like, go look at the touchdown to Julio Jones. Danny Johnson is playing through Julio Jones's hands, and Julio almost rips Danny's arm off. Like, there's just nothing to do there except for be stronger and make the play. But like we said, we joked, I just threw out a number, like, instead of 20%, 25%, how about 5%?
Yeah.
On the 15 targets to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, it's 15 catches. Wow. A.J. was 8 for 8. Devontae was 7 for 7. Literally make a play, and you have a better performance. Like, that's what we're talking about here.
Those are a lot of those are contested catches. Like,
well, that's what I'm saying is, like, you're in position, but you have to make the play, and they've got to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, the one I would say that is obviously the one in the end zone with St. Just. I don't know what you do there. I think that's Forbes crazy. On the comeback. I think if the pressure's a little bit better, that's a more competitive down for him. The one that really bothers me was the 2-man, because you're basically in a double team on AJ Brown. Basically, it ends up playing that way, and there's no hit on him from the safety. Like, Forbes is up there trying to make a play. Like, that ball should come out. I think if that's Cam Curl, I think that ball comes out. And so that's, again, 2 young players against a very good player. And that's tough, man. It's really frustrating. I don't know if you can hear my frustration. It's frustrating to watch that, because you're like, I don't know what you would do differently. Do you call different defenses? Because Jack was pretty in and out. They played man, they played 2, they played 3. They did some different stuff. And, when they were in 2, they were kind of exploiting the middle of the field. And, we talked about Mayo and his ability to do the correct thing, but not the ability to do that next level thing and protect that dig throw. And I'm not saying Cody could have done it either, but at least maybe the window's a little bit cloudier.
Yeah, it's harder.
And in coverage, there was so many issues and a lot of space, and don't really have a good answer for it, honestly.
No, I mean, this goes back to a statement that I feel like I'm probably unfortunately going to say a lot more this year, but I kind of came up with it after everyone was griping about the offense last week. There is no play call that is execution proof. Like, there just isn't. Like, eventually you have to execute, and executing could be making the throw, making the right read, swiping the ball out. Like, it's all those things. It's the throwing, the catching, the blocking, the tackling, the fundamentals of the sport. And there is no play that is execution proof. There are some plays that are easier perhaps for certain players to execute than others. Right. Maybe you're in a better position. You prevent the throw in the first place, and we could go super deep. We'd have to watch every play again 4 more times to, like, really probably understand that. But realistically, like, when guys are in that good of position and you have, like, let's say 12 of those 15 plays to Brown and Smith are contested, something like that. Yeah. Like, you just got to have dudes making plays. And
also to that point, though, like, if you're in the right coverage, does Devontae Smith get that touchdown at the end of the game? Like, that to me is maybe a bigger one, is what is in your control, and it's your attention to detail, like your mental acuity. And that's one where they weren't on the same page, and it ends up being a big play. And that's something we said you had to avoid. And because, again, AJ Brown, he's going to make his plays. Like, he's playing like one of the best receivers in football right now. That, I think, if I was going to point to one thing, maybe you can't coach the catch point, but man, we can make sure we're in cover 2 when we're in cover 2 and limit that throw. And who knows what happens? Maybe I think that was like 2nd and 15 on that play, or 2nd and 18. So then you're in a nice 3rd down situation. You're not really in field goal range. You give the ball back to your offense. It's 24-17, or 24-20, or 24-20, even if they kick the field goal. And that's a totally different dynamic to that game off of a coverage bust. And we're not talking about the defense in the same way, because they were able to make 3 red zone stops in that game. And that's good football, and that's what you're looking for. But one comes on a mental mistake. So I would say maybe you can't coach the physical stuff, but you can coach the mental stuff, and we can make sure we're on the same page. And again, it's one play where there was a glaring mental mistake, but that in a game like this where it's close against a good football team, like, that's a big deal.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. Logan Paulson there, Craig Hoffman here. We will be there, if there is, MGM National Harbor at Tap Sports Bar on Sunday. Oh, you like that transition, huh?
That was good, yeah.
It's professional over here. Tap Sports Bar is where we hang out Sunday mornings, getting you ready for the Commanders, in this case, Patriots game. We are live at 10 a.m. on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980 for the Take Command pregame show. Also stream it live on YouTube at the Team 980 and 106.7 The Fan. All right, Logan, let's talk about the offense, which was mostly fantastic, but had some, to use Jahan Dotson's word, major flinches at key moments. Let's talk about the good stuff first, because at the end of the day, like, Sam Howell threw for damn near 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. He seemed to have way more freedom at the line of scrimmage, which I thought was really important. I thought EB gave him a bunch of easy stuff. The screen game was the most active it's been all year. What do you make of kind of big picture thoughts of the passing game specifically, and how that was supported by everything else, play calling, run game, execution, yada, yada?
Yeah, I thought EB did an excellent job when he was calling this game. I thought they came out and there wasn't a lot of shots downfield until the Terry touchdown. They just did a great job. Quick game screen, quick game run, whatever. And it just kept them off rhythm, and guys made plays. Sam found the right matchups. You mentioned some of his involvement at the line of scrimmage. I thought that was really nice too. He checked to, I forget what it was. It was like all slants, like 3 slants to the right where he hits Logan Thomas. He alerts that. Great job there, identifying something you want, hitting your best matchup. He checked to a screen on a 4th and 15 versus an all-out pressure look. They bailed out of it, so they kind of got him. But I like that he's taking ownership of that. I thought the protections in general were much better called with Larson in there. And again, that's maybe not a fair comparison to Gates last week against New York, but I thought Larson, there wasn't any free runners. There was a little bit of kind of miscommunication, let's say, between Leno and Chris Paul, which we talked about in terms of passing off stunts. I thought physically Chris Paul did what you wanted him to do, but like he lost.
He definitely had some mistakes, but that's basically his second career game.
Yeah, but it's him on like stunts. They're on different levels, and that comes with time and experience. Lost to Jalen Carter once, but I thought overall played well enough for them to win the football game. And I just like everyone made plays, and I think that was cool to see. Is Terry made plays, Jahan made plays, Jahan was getting open, Jahan was featured early. I love that the first call of the game is you're motioning the back to empty, you run a slant, it's man coverage, the Mike linebacker tears out of there with the back, and you're able to hit a slant to Jahan for an easy pick. Jahan next play is running a choice completion to Jahan, right? Terry's on the touchdown. B-Rob on the long run was great to see. I loved his patience on that run. I know that's something people have been talking about a little bit with him. Very patient, great kick out by Chris Paul. Fantastic double team. You're probably not going to see a better double team than that in the NFL with Cosme and Wiley. Really nice job moving him off the spot. He's not even touched till he gets pushed out of bounds by Slay, which is 40 yards.
Well, that's also a play. I think they run a little bit of jet motion, and then we talked about how when the back is offset right in the gun, you run left 90% of the time. They brought that, this is part on Robinson being patient enough to set this up, but they brought that run back right. So it's like all the things that you'd hope to see if you're going to detail up a run a little bit and kind of, take away all the reasons why the run game hasn't been working, all combined into one play. You get some motion, you break a tendency, and then you execute the hell out of it. And
they ran from a little bit more from under center, which I love. They had a couple of really nice duos that are well blocked, physical. B-Rob's running hard. I thought Gibson had one of his better games of the year. Obviously, there was some pass protection stuff with Gibson and with B-Rob. I think you got to give credit to Nakobe Dean. That dude was blitzing like an absolute missile. But they got in there. They stuck their face on him. And, for the touchdown, I think it was Jahan's touchdown. Nakobe Dean's blitzing, great pickup by Robinson, able to hit Jahan for a touchdown on the seam on the all-go special. I just loved what they were doing. It was a diverse group. They knew what Philly was trying to do to them, and they were able to execute at a high level. And I just, for 3.5 quarters of football, it was about as pretty as you're going to see. I loved the backed up sequence when they're on the one and they're in the gun in the end zone. I know a lot of people probably didn't like that, but I'm like, how, like, the courage and the confidence you have in your young quarterback in this moment to be throwing out of this situation was pretty cool. So there was just so much really positive stuff. The O-line played great, really. I mean, they played really, really well. Wiley had a great game outside the sack, which was on 4th down. I don't know exactly if he was maybe late on the cadence there or whatever, but for the most part did a really good job. Obviously, they gave up pressures, but they were slow pressures, late in the down pressures. I thought Sam, this is one of his better games with regards to getting the ball out of his hand and the timing. There was a couple times where they're dropping out under a dig, under kind of a post or a corner, and there's not this hesitation, pat, to get the ball to the sail or get the ball to the dig. It's like the ball's to the check down right now. I thought that was some nice maturity there. There was some movement in the pocket from Sam, which was great.
That was one of my favorite things I saw from him. I was like, oh, he can. If he does that, then we're in business. Yeah. And that's a big reason why he doesn't take 5 sacks for the first time all year. Yeah. Is because there are times where he just subtly slides out of the way. And one, that helps him avoid pressure. Two, it creates a throwing lane. I also thought he used his arm angles really well in this game. Yeah. There's a couple balls, including the touchdown to Logan, that are kind of sidearm. So he was able to find windows in ways that he hadn't previously.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, lots of good stuff. Like, really, like, a lot of good stuff. And my only criticism was how the last 8.5 minutes of the game went. Really. Yeah. That's the only thing that I have even a moment's pause with. So
let's talk about the pick real quick, because that is one where there is the deeper route to Terry. Yeah. He's got Jahan on a shallow cross underneath. My guess is you should probably just, like, the thing is, like, a good throw, he might get Terry there. It's not a good ball, but it's like, just take the easy one. Take the underneath route. It's second down. Like, just hit Jahan and let him run, because he's in an open space. You might wind up with the same gain anyway.
Yeah, and maybe Terry should inside release that. I don't know. So obviously, if you outside release and then run the dig, you create a little bit of space away from that. I don't know if it's a Tampa 2 player, but definitely like kind of that middle hook player. And it's a cloudy window for sure. Like, I was surprised that he threw the ball, honestly, because it's a little bit muddy, and especially when there's someone coming into your vision right in front of you and there's nobody around Jahan, probably take the safe play there, especially like when in those long drive sequences, like it's so important to get that first one called, get that first completion, and it gets the ball rolling. You get ahead of the sticks, all those things. So that I didn't love that decision. There was a couple moments like that earlier in the game where you're kind of like, they're in the red zone. He's trying to force the ball in. The ball gets tipped at the line of scrimmage, and probably to the benefit of the offense. But again, that's one kind of big mistake. I did feel at times, like on the fourth down, for example, like forcing the ball to Terry on an out, probably not great. Again, he gets away with a PI, but I think overall, like
on that play, Curtis winds up screaming,
oh my gosh, so
wide open. Is there anything that could have indicated pre-snap that he should have not gone to Terry, or did you just see the one-on-one on Terry and you're like, that's my matchup? Because like that's what we'd all beg, like, right? If he goes to the other side and there's an incompletion, we're all going, dude, you got Terry one-on-one. Why don't you just throw to Terry?
Right.
Like, just make it easy. And so it's hard for me to be critical until you see Curtis just the most open that any receiver will ever be in NFL history, open down the middle of the field, because the Eagles completely bust it.
Right.
So is there anything pre-snap that could have indicated, hey, dude, maybe look over here?
No, I was trying to figure out what concept they were running. They kind of stopped really early. It looks like they might be running like what I would characterize as like a pit, like so post sit concept with a flat or a bow concept, and Curtis takes it to a post. But they end up with two guys kind of standing right next to each other, B-Rob and Logan Thomas. So it could have been arches also, where Logan's supposed to run across the formation, and then B-Rob's supposed to run the angle there, and then Curtis is supposed to clear it out. And I guess depending on the concept, some of those are good versus man, and some of those are good versus zone. The pits, the bows, all those ones are probably better versus zone, in my opinion. Obviously, they can be fine versus man if you like the matchup. But if that's the case, if that was the concept called, then you want to work the one-on-one to Terry. And if it's because it was obviously man coverage, right? And if it's that arches concept, I probably want to work the side of the back, because he's going to run this angle on a linebacker and break across the face of that player for the ball, but it doesn't look like arches. So nothing that I
just bad luck.
Not knowing the concept really. Like I don't think there's any reason to work over there unless it's one of those man beating concepts. But yeah, and I just don't love. I think it's supposed to be a hitch or something. And they get away with a little bit of defensive pass interference. But yeah, man, that was a tough down there, because he is. I mean, that's a touchdown if he throws it to Curtis, and I don't know anything that would take his eyes over there. You have to ask Sam probably or EB like what the read was there, but man, he was so.
That's a pre-snap decision. You stick with it. It's fine from a process standpoint, but It looked like it was an out, and he threw a hitch. So I don't. It's just not
I don't
on the
like
same
an
page.
if it was an out, I don't like the out. I don't like an out in like a press man situation or a man situation. I don't like outs because those DBs are too good, and he's at a full width split. There's not a lot of space for him to throw the out. So like, let's make sure that we're giving the quarterback a ball there. So I would have preferred maybe a different route if it was an out. I don't know. I couldn't really tell.
Terry definitely broke out. So that is what it is. All right. What else from the offense? I mean, you said the O-line played great. It seemed to be a lot more organized with Larson. Also, as you said, not facing a Wink Martindale defense will tend to make you look a lot more organized. So that is nice.
Well, and also, I think this is a cool comparison, right? So that defensive line is one of the best defensive lines in football, and they were silent all day. Versus
how much like gameplay did they have? Did they stunt? They twist?
They did a little bit.
A bunch of that stuff.
They did a little bit. I mean, it really felt like we were watching the Commanders. Like, you know what I'm saying? And I think it just shows you how challenging it can be to win with a 4-man rush consistently in a game. Because that's really what he said is like, we're going to play coverage and we're going to rush 4. And obviously there were places where they did bring pressure. But I just remember thinking like, this is the same issue that the Commanders run into is they're trying to rush with 4. The concepts that Philly calls versus the Commanders, that every team calls versus the Commanders, gets the ball out quickly. And when it's time to take a shot, the defensive line's a little bit fatigued. They're not ready for the opportunity and ends up being an explosive play. And I just remember thinking like EB took maybe what New York did, just took good football practice and called a game that totally mitigated the effectiveness of that group, made the offense, elevated the offensive line, which is something we've been calling for. And it's the same game plan, roughly. Same is probably strong, but a very similar game plan to what they ran in the first matchup. So I just think it's good play calling. It's good execution. It's when a simple defensive line rush strategy, it allows the offensive line to play better. So I really thought it was a nice kind of juxtaposition for showing that group is one of the best in football, right? I mean, everyone thinks Philly's defensive line is good, and they were basically held to a clean sheet all day. And I'm not even talking about clean sheet when it comes to sacks, but like even with regards to pressure, I don't think Sam was hit one time outside the sack. So like that is
you had the intentional grounding, and then there was one or two. There was definitely one or two more.
So that was a keeper, right? And so obviously like the defense.
Are you talking about like drop back situation?
Yeah, drop back situation. Yeah, gotcha. Sorry, I should have been more clear there.
Yeah, there's also one. I think the play before the touchdown to Logan, maybe it's the play before the touchdown to Jahan. He gets smashed in the face and he bounces right back. It was one thing that I had in my notes of like the resiliency that Sam showed. I don't remember the type of play that it was. Yeah. So I don't know whether it was a drop back or not, but like the resiliency there for Sam to just take that hit, come right back, throw a touchdown next. He's
a tough kid, but I mean, even there, so there's two hits. I mean, I don't know if you have the PFF stats in front of you. Like,
I can pull it up real quick.
And obviously, there was the one where Jalen Carter gets the pressure up the middle, but he doesn't get hit. Like
he was hit 5 times in the game.
I mean,
on 52 passes.
Like, holy cow! Like that's an excellent performance by the O-line. Excellent performance by EB. So I think that is more in line with how that group's been playing throughout the year, and fans are gonna be like, "What the hell are you talking about, Logan?" But I think, like I said before, the New York Giants game was probably the worst game they've had all year. Other than that, I think they've played okay. This is probably one of their better games. So
this to me is how play calling elevates, though, right? 100%. Is like you slow the rush down because you throw a bunch of screens. Sam's got way more 3-step stuff than 5, or as opposed to all the 5-step stuff. Like you get the ball actually out of his hands quickly, and an O-line that's playing at a decent level gives up 1 sack, 1 intentional grounding, and 5 hits and 52 passing attempts versus, giving up 5 to 9 sacks on 35 because, 75% of them are 5-step drops.
Yeah, 100%. And so I think that, again, credit to EB. Good job by Sam elevating.
And please do it again next week and the week after that.
Yeah. And so I think this is the good formula. I think EB is going to throw the ball a ton. And but this is how you insulate a good passing attack, and I think it's pretty cool to watch. Yeah. So
last thing I'll say real quick, we talked about how last week about how it's not necessarily about running the ball; it's about having the threat of the run to keep a defense honest, and that was definitely the case this week. I would like to see them run it a little bit more, just because they were effective, and like let's do the thing that's effective.
Right.
But at the end of the day, like that threat helps, and some of the play action stuff is more effective. Everything's just more effective when you have to be honest as a defense. All right, that is our show for this week. Coming up later in the week, obviously, we have our preview of New England. I'm definitively scared about this game.
Me too.
Because of how Belichick kind of plays things defensively. So we will dive deeper into that. But that is how the Philly game went. Talk about it more on the radio as well. Of course, 4 to 7 every day on the Team 980. I've got the Hoffman Show, which is also where we will have, I guess at this point, had full reaction to the NFL trade deadline. So if anything happened there, we will talk about it. Perhaps Logan will hop on later if there's a mega trade and he's got time too. So if that happens, we'll also stick it here in the Take Command feed. For Logan, I'm Craig. We'll see you next time on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.